Hello again. Well, our journey through the prophet Isaiah now comes to the final two chapters. When I was a lad, and in the days when dinosaurs ruled the earth, and I first begun to study biblical studies at a sort of scholarly level, um, it was an assured result among the scholars that the book of Isaiah could be divided into three sections. The first one, the first 39 chapters, written in Jerusalem during the great crisis of the 8th century, the Assyrian invasion of Judah. A second one, much later on, between chapters 40 and 55, which was situated much later in the time at the ending of the Babylonian Empire, when Cyrus was coming into view and the promised liberation and return from exile in Babylon was in everyone's mind, and the prophet foresaw. And then thirdly, a little later, perhaps 40 or 50 years later, or maybe not quite so much, certainly after the immediate hopes raised by Cyrus weren't quite fulfilled. And so from chapters 56 to 66, third Isaiah was supposed to have written the final 10 chapters of the book. Well, as said, that was held to be an assured result. But unfortunately, for those who go along with that scheme, and you find many scholars just seem to continue to adopt it without much thinking, um, it's now very much in doubt. Um, what scholars have begun to notice is the unity of Isaiah. The way that, for instance, in chapter 13, which is supposed to be all about the Assyrian crisis in the 8th century, there's a chapter foretelling the end of Babylon, which at that point in history is a very much subdued city under Assyrian yoke. And yet it's talked of as a great threat, which is going to end. But that seems to belong much later than in the Assyrian crisis of the 8th century. Now, in fact, what Isaiah is a complex unity, but one in which prophecies which relate to different historical times are drawn together around a complex set of uniting themes. And it's no surprise that when we come to the end of the book, chapters 65 and 66, these themes swell. It's like the end of a great symphony, like the end of Beethoven's Ninth, when the joy which has been suppressed throughout the symphony suddenly bursts out into the great ode to joy, uniting the symphony, bringing it together at the end. And this is something very similar happening here at the end of the book, chapters 65 and 66. Those unifying themes which the prophets have been on about all the way through the book suddenly come into view in full force, as it were. And what are those themes? Well, there is only one God, immortal, invisible, the only wise God. All the gods of the people are idols. And those who worship idols will reap the reward of that great sin. So this is been a constant theme of Isaiah, the danger of idolatry, the fact there's only one true God, and here it comes in full measure. And that great God, that one true God, has a plan for history. He has been speaking to his people, calling them to repentance throughout all the crises that they've faced in the 200 years which the book covers. And he's been saying to them, don't worship idols, turn to me and I will restore you. And so the book ends with not just a vision of a restored Jerusalem, there is that there in the end of chapter 65, but new heavens and new earth, the renewal and restoration of all creation. That's what this God is about. This messed up cosmos, he has a plan to restore it and renew it. And this is what, of course, makes the end of the book so powerful. This clear sense that no matter what suffering we endure in our present lives, no matter what the superpowers and the tyrants plan, God's plan is more powerful and will in the end prevail. And yet the book ends on a note of judgment. There will be those who will die because they won't go along with this plan. They'll turn to the idols that we've made. They'll worship them and away from the true God. Their end will be death. And it's on that bleak note, after the joy and the insights of chapter 65 and 66, it's on that bleak and very challenging note that the book ends. It's something that's been said throughout the book, but it's emphasized at the end. We would do well to pay heed, both to the joyful proclamation that God is in charge and that he rules, and the consequences for those of us who turn away from that gracious and joyful rule. It's a great book. It's been called the Fifth Gospel because it was drawn upon at great length by Jesus and by the other authors of the New Testament. And it resonates so much with the gospel message, both in its challenge and above all in its joyful news.